welcome to another episode of Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and today we've reached the halfway mark in our Davros marathon of sorts. We are looking at Resurrection of the Daleks, one of the final Fifth Doctor stories, which is another weird thing for me to discover as I was doing these. I was surprised at how early Genesis was in the Fourth Doctor run and how late Resurrection is in the Fifth Doctor run. They really spaced out Dalek stories back in the day.
Yeah, they did a little bit. Um, Even, with Destiny, it'd been like 4 years. There was basically a 4-year gap between them, so...
Well, it's interesting that if Peter Davison had decided maybe 6 months earlier that he wanted to stop doing the show, it's very likely that Doctor would never have encountered the Daleks, which is wild that
It
could
is.
possibly have happened.
Yeah. I don't think there's ever been a Doctor that hasn't fought the Daleks.
We haven't seen the Eighth Doctor on screen face the Daleks.
Oh, that's true. Yes, no.
But that's extenuating
Not quite right.
circumstances, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough.
I'm sure that in Big Finish stories, Paul McGann has encountered them.
Yeah. He's in there's a Davros episode with Paul McGann in it, of the Big Finish stories. Anyway, yeah, but you're right, it is curious to have them spaced out.
Especially because we're used to basically, once a year Dalek appearances at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit... I mean, I don't know if I'd say it's oversaturated, but, maybe it is, actually.
I mean, it possibly is. It was a case in the classics where the Daleks showing up was genuinely frightening and shocking. Whereas when has gotten to the point now where it's like, okay, we've here they are, we've reached our yearly Dalek quota. Hope this is a good one. It hasn't been lately.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what the most recent pure Dalek story that I would call really, really good is. I think it's Victory of the Daleks. I think we have to go that far back.
Wow. By the way, I'm sure I've seen it, but I can't remember all the details. Is Asylum of the Daleks that bad?
Yes. I'm not going to elaborate. It just is. It's terrible.
Okay.
We'll get there. But Jesus Christ, there is so much that is wrong with that story.
I can't wait.
Oh, that's probably one of the worst, honestly. I can't... Destiny might top it for you, but I would struggle to name a Dalek story that is worse than Asylum of the Daleks.
We will... We'll definitely see. It is a Moffat story, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's his first pure Dalek episode.
Oh, God. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. We'll get to it eventually.
We'll get there, but for now, Resurrection. Before I do any timescale stuff, what are your initial thoughts on this story?
Yeah, so I've probably mentioned before, but this was a very formative, it's only a formative Doctor Who memory for me, but really just a formative memory generally in my childhood. It was the first Doctor Who story I owned on DVD. I think I got it for my 9th birthday. And my first Davros story. It, I loved it as a kid. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say I became obsessed with it to the point that I could quote most of the whole story, and in fact did, as annoying as that probably was. But yeah, it was a big thing for me. And when I was watching this again, as I have done so far with classic stories, or at least I certainly hope I have, I tried really, really hard not to strap on my nostalgia goggles too tight. There's a couple of curious things. In some ways, it's actually better than I remember it being. Most of them having to do with theme and tone, and the way they're expressed, but I've watched this story now, I think it's 3 times in the last 10 days.
Wow.
So, as I've said, I like to watch multiple times, and I just wanted to be sure on how I felt about it.
Hmm.
It's still the good bits that I like are better than I remember them being, and I think that's simply because I'm older and I have a better understanding of
Of why they're good.
theme. Yeah, and also, I don't know, better appreciation for mortality, I guess, because
Sure.
Jesus Christ, this story is grim. But um, the flaws became more pronounced each time I've watched it in the last 10 days. So I still really do enjoy it, but the flaws are certainly there. And we'll definitely we'll get into them. There, most of them are fairly small, but there are a lot of them, I think, and they're not. There are so many of them that they're not ignorable for me. Um,
Sure.
I will say I think it's the plot itself. I think is not. There's quite a bit happening in it, but I feel like it starts off pretty strong. Middle gets a bit confused. The ending is pretty good.
Yeah.
I think the second episode is probably for me better than the first in a lot of ways, despite the fact that it's more narratively cluttered. But yeah, it's a bit of a tangled mess. So we'll have to yeah, we'll go through it.
Sure. Yeah. I'm. I like this story. I'm not sure exactly where I fall on it yet. I can't think of any huge glaring problems with it yet. But I mean,
Mhm.
maybe when you talk about them, I'll realize them, as is often the case with us. Um,
Mhm.
but for now, I think we should just do our regular format.
Uh huh.
So, out of 155 votes, this story has an average rating of 7.6.
My nostalgia me is probably going to get annoyed at this, but honestly, I think that's a little high.
Wow, okay.
Mm.
That's interesting, because I was going to say it's a smidge low, but
Mhm.
again, we'll see.
Mhm.
Uh, incidentally, this is the seventh highest rated Fifth Doctor story.
Huh. Right.
There aren't a huge amount of them, but
No.
uh,
Top
yeah,
10.
it's pun.
It's in top 10.
Yeah, it's seventh best. It's below Caves of Androzani, Earthshock, Enlightenment, Kinda, Mordred Undead, and the Five Doctors.
Hmm. Right. Yeah, I guess it makes sense. I mean,
Yeah, I
so
mean there are some here that are ranked significantly lower, and
yeah.
it'll be interesting to see how they hold up
Hmm.
compared to this one. 7.4 for plot.
Um. Again, there's quite a lot happening in it. Um.
Yeah, definitely. There's quite a lot.
It, I again, I know I've mentioned this over and over, but the documentary, The Dalek Tapes, which is incidentally narrated by Terry Malloy,
Oh,
um, he describes this story as an action-packed killathon with a higher body count than the Terminator, and
yep.
I'd believe that because I'm pretty sure every single side character here dies.
I looked it up. This story features 76 on-screen deaths.
Whoa!
It's the highest body count
Jesus Christ!
for a Doctor Who story as of 2021. I think I saw.
Wow. Again, I'd believe that, but man, that's kind of fucking wild.
Yeah,
Um,
it's not something that you like think about that much as you're watching it
no,
because it's the
no.
Daleks.
Hmm.
But like but thinking about that, it's like, hang on, what? So this story has a higher body count than Dalek, an episode which just is a Dalek killing everything it sees.
Well,
Seriously?
Dalek didn't open with innocent people getting gunned down in the street by police officers.
That's true. Yeah,
Jesus, what a way to start a story.
yeah. And I love how this behind the scenes thing says as of 2021 it has the highest on screen body count, because like 2021 is the year that Flux aired.
uh, yeah.
So like how I'm not sure. I'm not even entirely sure how you would classify the body counts in Flux. Like they don't
Mm,
happen on screen, but it's implied that a significant majority of the universe
mm,
was destroyed by the Flux.
mm,
So that would certainly boost the numbers of that storyline.
mm-hmm,
But again, I'm not sure how you classify it.
mm-hmm.
8.1 for acting. Yeah, I think that's about right. I think aside from, again, as I mentioned in the past, uh, some Dalek deaths that are really, really over the top and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just uh, exasperated for the sake of just big death acting.
Mm. Yeah,
The
yeah.
rest of it's fine.
They've clearly been told, oh yeah, no, 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 no. This is like, imagine if radioactive electric shocks were being transmitted through the floor. That's what you should be doing, and they get
Alright, cool. So
very,
I'll stumble around with my arms in the air for 10 seconds before
yeah.
I collapse neatly onto the ground. Is that what you
E-
want me to do?
Even small ones though, they don't, they certainly don't ruin it for me. But even other things like when the other people are getting shot, not by Dalek guns,
Yeah.
they're quite mannered and theatrical. It's like, oh no, I'm falling. Wait, shit, I don't want to actually fall. Okay, I'll just stumble and make my way to the ground. It's
Well, I also find it funny that the way that a lot of actors think getting shot works is that when the bullet hits you, it's like just having your strings cut as if you're a puppet, and it's not like instead of the severe piercing pain and shock that occurs centralized in that
mm,
area.
mm. I mean,
Because
maybe it works for the
especially when
lasers in that sense, but
sure, lasers definitely, but especially when they're getting gunned down by machine guns early on, it does kind of look like bullet hits me and I'm just gonna drop. Instead of like,
yeah, even
no,
yeah,
carry
the
on the force
openings.
of the bullet. If you get shot in the gut, your gut is the first thing to feel it. Like,
Yeah,
do the motion.
I mean, to be fair, that guy, the old guy on the street who gets shot, he clutches his gut,
Oh, he clutches his gut. He's
but
doing
then he
really
just
well.
drops.
He
Yeah,
does.
which is even later on when Tegan's being chased by the police people and they shoot the random guy who's got the metal detector, he goes down like a stone,
Well, that could have
man.
been a
Like,
headshot.
yeah, probably.
But, like, the guy who
Um,
gets shot in the gut, as we all know, like, bullets are 100% lethal wherever you get hit. So.
yeah. Um, yeah. So those, yeah, the deaths are a bit huggy, and also the bits where the people are getting controlled with Davros's mind control thingy. Their reactions are very,
They're varied.
yeah, very huggy. Oh, actually, and I definitely will mention this. Um, I've forgotten his name. The guy who plays Stein.
Rodney Buse.
Yeah. Look, here's the thing. A good deal of that performance is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Certainly, before he reveals his betrayal, the fact that he basically admits he's a coward and that he's obviously terrified. That he portrays that pretty convincingly. And even when he reveals that he's an agent working for the Daleks and he's being all, robotic and sort of Dalek-y and he's strapping the Doctor in for the brain drain thing. That kind of works, but man, when the Doctor's trying to convince him to not do it and he's clearly fighting the Daleks as mind control, even as a kid, I thought that was hokey. And when it gets to the bit, and it's also a combination of the performances and the writing, when he holds his head and literally says, "I can't stand the confusion in my mind." Again, even as a kid, I'm like, "Ugh, what are you doing there, man? That doesn't really work." And man, I can't. Look, as I said, I can take a lot of hokiness with Doctor Who. I don't even mind a lot of hokiness with like the minor characters or the extras or people playing the monsters, but like this guy has a decent character arc attached to him, and they're just sort of derailing the progress of that character arc in this moment, and I'm like, oh, did you have to do that? Really? So that's probably
I
the
in
biggest performance
fairness,
flaw for me.
in fairness, I can't think of a way you can deliver that line without it being hokey.
Oh yeah, again, as I said, it's a combination of the performances and the writing. It shouldn't have. I mean, Eric Saywood's writing, I quite like, and it's pretty good in this story. But it just, yeah, he shouldn't put that line in. I don't know what he was thinking there. Incidentally, this is the if it's believed that Eric Saywood wrote the bulk of Attack of the Cybermen, and this story actually, I think, reinforces that idea, and I'll
Uh-huh.
get to why that is in a bit, but if that's true, this is the third Eric Saywood story we've looked at, and when we look at Revelation, that'll be the fourth. So, it's, again, assuming he wrote the bulk of Attack of the Cybermen, he got two Cybermen stories and two Dalek stories.
Well, he wasn't a showrunner, was he?
No, he was a script editor at some point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, he wasn't credited with Attack, was he?
Script editor. I think he might have been. Again, we talked about this before with Attack of the Cybermen, but the authorship of that story, it's a bit confused, a bit muddled. Paula Moore was like sort of a pseudonym, and there are different claims as to who wrote it. It feels like an Eric Saywood story, just not a
Sure.
particularly good one. But yeah, I think I even mentioned they had this weird thing where at the time script editors were not allowed to write their own or edit their own stories that they'd written, so
Yeah.
that might be why. But the weird thing is, I also looked this up. I'm pretty sure Eric Saywood was both the script editor and writer of Revelation of the Daleks. So, and that's at the end of the same season as Attack of the Cybermen. So I'm not quite sure
Hmm.
what the behind scenes story of that is. But anyway, yeah, this is an Eric Saywood story, and I think to a fair extent that shows, and
Yeah.
it
Well, I
also
just looked it up. After Revelation, we have only one more Eric Saywood story
what
that
is it?
exists. The Visitation.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it's a Fifth Doctor story.
It is. Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, that makes sense. Still, it's kind of surprising, again, assuming he wrote most of Attack of the Cybermen, two Cybermen stories and two Dalek stories. Like,
Yeah. Wow.
he was pretty lucky in that sense.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's
We have a
pretty
7.8 for
wild.
effects.
Um,
I think most of this holds up pretty well.
yeah, there are a couple of issues I have. I mean, well, some are definitely worse than others. Like,
Yeah.
the smaller, offenses I have are the lasers, which are clearly just like dollar store flashing light things. They look like, toys.
Yeah.
Particularly the Dalek Trooper um, lasers. Also on the costume departments. Why did they have the Dalek eye stalk on the helmets of the Dalek Troopers? It. Oh God, I don't even think I'm going to unpack that, but it's dumb. And here's the thing, right? You wouldn't even really need to do that because we already know they're Dalek Troopers because they've got the little, Dalek spheres on the back of their helmets. And also they're called Dalek Troopers, so that makes sense. Um, it's obviously clearly taking place in a post-Star Wars world and I'm pretty sure, I can't remember who it was who said it, but I'm pretty sure someone behind the scenes says, yeah, they were basically modelled on stormtroopers, so that would make a lot of sense. Anyway, so that was a little dumb. Again, lasers that clearly look like flashing light toys, although the lasers that the prison crew have look a bit more convincing than what the Dalek troopers have.
Yeah.
There is one bit that it's partly with effects, but also with editing that was a bit of a problem. When near the end, when the the Daleks come in to kill the other rogue Daleks, and there's a big, basically a shootout that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
There's bits where you can clearly hear the Dalek gun noise happening, and people clearly are collapsing, but you don't see the
But no
Dalek
lasers.
ray being projected anywhere, which is a little strange.
Yeah, that bugged me as
Um,
well.
yeah, so that's worth pointing out. Beyond that, the explosion at the end with the Dalek ship and the space station looks a little bit fake. It's not too bad, but it's
Uh huh.
it's there.
Yeah, a lot of the other minis held up pretty well. Like when we see
Hmm.
spaceships, like just in space, like from wide shots and that, and especially like the
Yeah.
shot of the cruiser, boarding the prison
Oh
vessel.
yeah.
That
No, I
was
was
really
gonna say
nice.
the cruiser docking is quite good.
Yeah. I also just realized you mentioned the eye stalk on the helmets of the troopers.
Hmm.
I mean, it's clearly a visual that the Daleks like, because when they create human Daleks later on, it's a similar visual with the eye stalk poking out of the forehead of the. It's just the human Daleks are still the stupidest thing on the planet, and that's Asylum. So there you go. Um, this episode has a replay value of 7.8.
Um, again, I don't think I'd go that high because again, the good bits were even more highlighted the more I watched it, but the flaws became a bit more prominent. So, yeah.
Sure. And 12 people out of 76 say the story requires a previous. I think you do need to know the Davros of it all, especially towards the end
Oh,
when the Doctor's like seriously considering straight up killing him. You need that history.
well, sorry, did you say 12 out of 76 say it requires a previous viewing?
Yes.
Yeah. It. I think no. I think I disagree with even that because the Daleks time corridor. I'm pretty sure that's established in the previous story Frontios.
I looked it up. It is.
That's sorry.
It is. I looked it up.
Yeah, that's how the Doctor gets to where um they are. So on that alone, you'd need to see the previous story. Otherwise, you'd wonder what's really going on here.
But it's also almost a direct continuation from Destiny. You know, it deals with the fallout of that war. Like the whole reason the Daleks are in the situation
War, yeah.
they're in is because of the whole Mavellan incident.
Yeah, which they do a bit of contradiction to the canon there. When Davros says, "Fascinating. If only I had been there." You were there, Davros. The Doctor was there and locked you in cryogenic stasis. That's why you're in cryogenic stasis.
He wasn't there for long enough, which I think was Davros's larger point.
But he then says, but like he says, yeah, like two totally logical war machines unable to outthink each other. That's the fascinating bit. But like, you knew about that, Davros.
That's why true,
that's why they resurrected you in the first place.
I mean, that line was clearly there just to be like, in case you haven't seen Destiny.
Yeah, which is true. Having said that, it doesn't bother me quite as much as when the Doctor says, "I saw you. The Daleks blasted you at point blank range in Destiny when he didn't." And the reason why is for two reasons. One, Davros has been completely conscious in cryogenic stasis for 90 years.
Yep.
God knows, if he's lost even more of his sanity than he already has. So maybe that's happened. Maybe his memories have gotten muddled.
Sure.
But also, I think it may speak to Davros's duplicity, which gets explored in this story. One of the better parts of the story, I might add, and it's why this story reminded me why I hated Destiny of the Daleks so much, because here, the Daleks and Davros are actually characterized well. They're actually scheming. They're actually doing things. It's a wonderful battle of wills to it.
I mean, we'll get to that now, I guess. Like, the huge bulk of the episode, it starts out as a pretty standard Dalek story, where it's like, there's this Dalek virus going around. Oh, incidentally, I like how in canon, this establishes that Mavellans are stronger or better than Daleks because they actually won the war, and yet we've never seen the Mavellans again. And Daleks have stuck around. I guess the Mavellans just turned themselves off at one point. But yeah, the inciting incident is there's this Dalek virus going around, and the Daleks can't work out a cure, so they need Davros. But it quickly becomes a sort of a cold war between Davros and the Supreme Dalek. Over who should lead the Daleks and who should be in control, which this is almost a better, it's easily a better spiritual sequel to Genesis than Destiny was. It's a better continuation from when the Daleks tried to kill Davros, because he's clearly hasn't forgotten that, and now he's like, okay, I'm gonna be in control of you. It's to the point where I'm not even gonna give you free will. Essentially, I'm gonna mind control you into doing what I want you to do. And also, there's this other thing leading you, Supreme Dalek. No. There shouldn't be any such thing as a Supreme Dalek. I think he says as much in Destiny.
Yeah, he says, I
One of the
am. Yeah,
yeah,
that is a
it's one of
title
the
I will dispute most vigorously.
it's one of the few good lines in Destiny,
Yeah.
and it's
Well.
carried through here uh, really effectively. And
Yeah.
if we talk about Genesis being a biting critique of fascism and how self-destructive it is, this continues that, not as overtly,
Ab-
but it certainly follows it through.
but it definitely does. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I guess I'll bring this up now. I was wondering when I was, but um, I think I mentioned in when we did Destiny, there's that one bit of dialogue between Davros and the Doctor where he's pointing the gun at him, and I said, yeah, that's quite a bit of good dialogue. Um, it is. It's really really great in terms of characterization, and for me, it it helps to sort of unpack sort of fascist mindsets because like okay, so Davros so yeah, I'm going to completely redesign the Daleks. Yeah, no, don't worry, Doctor, it's all good. I'm going to make sure that they understand instinct and intuition. And the Doctor says, yeah, but only to make them better killers. Incidentally, that actually is already shown in the story because there's that bit where the Supreme Dalek says the Doctor is sentimental and emotional. He will come
yeah.
after the boy. He would be better used as bait. So that clearly shows that they're learning there. So there's that. Anyway,
Well,
but yeah,
essentially, he,
so
he says that he'll give the Daleks instinct and intuition, and then the Doctor asks and compassion, and
yeah,
Davros says, "Well, they'll understand it,
they'll
but I
understand how to
mean,
recognize it in other creatures.
yeah, exactly. Like, well, I mean, it'll
Yeah,
certainly be something they're more familiar with, but I don't want
yeah,
anyone getting any ideas about how
yeah,
compassionate they should be."
yeah. And then yeah, and then Davros says the great bit for me, well, the disturbing bit where he's like, he comes with again one of his nasty little bullshit rationalizations where it's like the universe is at war, Doctor. Name me one planet whose history is not littered with atrocities. It is a universal way of life. No, it isn't. And it's great
No.
that the Doctor then refutes it by saying, it's something that I don't accept. And I admire Eric Saywood's courage, not only showing this mindset for what it is, but having the Doctor refute it. Um,
Yeah.
and then Davros says the even worse thing, where he's like, you deny what is real. No, he's not. It such a fucking stupid idea
Yeah.
and I know I brought this up in Genesis, but I'm gonna do it again. The insane idea, which is I think best or worst exemplified really with Nazism, for example, the idea that life is innately combative, or that
Yeah.
that the dog eat dog strategy is a natural way of life, and we that's what we should be emulating. First of all, like, no, it's not. Like,
No.
what do you mean natural? What the fuck does that even mean? And let's say, even if it was, that doesn't make it good. Yeah. Do you know what
No.
else is
Yeah.
natural? Pandemics, floods, and famines. But we as a society have decided those are actually kind of shitty things, and we shouldn't let
Yeah.
people just suffer, problems like that.
Mm.
And it's only when we allow, all people, to get a seat at the table rather than reducing life to a nasty game of musical chairs. It's only when we allow or create systems where the most disadvantaged, the most unprivileged, again, are able to get a seat at that table. So that's why I love that bit of dialogue, because it exemplifies this horrific worldview, but it also works because the Doctor refutes it. And it's
Yes.
great in that sense. And
Well,
as I say, I admire Eric Saywood's courage for doing that.
yeah, that scene in general is like one of my favorites of the entire story, but also how it
Mm.
factors into like how the story ends. Because I think it's very deliberate that the
Yes.
Doctor doesn't make the decision to spare Davros. The only reason that he
Yes.
doesn't shoot Davros is because he goes to check on Stein
And the door
in the
closes.
hallway, and the door closes behind him. Yeah, like
Yeah,
he hadn't made the decision to lower the gun definitively. He was still
absolutely.
tossing up between. And I think that factors in perfectly to the reason that Tegan leaves. So
Yes.
spoilers.
Um,
This is Tegan's departure
yeah.
episode, and it's kind of a shame because Tegan doesn't really have that much to do in this story. She gets a bad blow to the head early on and is out of action, and then
Mm,
has a lot of time to get traumatized. But for her, this episode is the straw that breaks the camel's back. She's seen too
Mm.
much,
Mm.
especially. I think that the tipping point is also like when the Doctor's using the virus on the Daleks, and it's an idea. It's an idea that she had, but I think
Mm.
seeing it was a bit much for her.
Mm.
So she's like,
Mm.
okay, you know what? It's not fun anymore. I'm out, and it's a really mature departure,
Yeah.
which is especially jarring when juxtaposed with how she returns in Power of the Doctor, framing it like it was
Oh,
a bad breakup on his
I
part.
don't even. I don't even want to. Anyway.
Yeah, but
Yes,
like
you're.
the Doctor has that deliberate line that's like, that's the reason that I ran away from home all those
Yeah.
years ago.
I
Maybe
must.
it's
I
time
must
I
change
change.
my ways.
Yes, exactly, and I think like
Yeah.
it's strange like because it's something you don't even notice, but like a lot of the story is built around getting the Doctor to resoundly reject Davros's philosophy. Obviously, he does that in the moment, but you could argue that if Tegan hadn't left, he might have continued using more attributive
Yeah.
forms of problem solving.
Mm.
Because, like I said, he doesn't make the decision to not kill Davros. He allows the use of a biological weapon on the Daleks, which again isn't necessarily the worst thing, but it could have sent him down a worse path. Especially again when you
Absolutely.
factor in Genesis and how he didn't make that decision in the past.
Mm.
And I think having that moment at the end of this story, where Tegan's departure forces him to re-examine the direction he's going in,
Mm-hmm.
it's really a surprisingly effective companion departure for not a lot of build up to it or a lot of spectacle surrounding it. It's not a companion
Yeah.
death
Well.
like Adric. It's not
Yeah. Yeah.
a companion being trapped across the multiverse like Rose was. It's literally just a companion saying to the Doctor, "This is bad for me now. I'm going,"
Mm-hmm.
and that affects him
Yep.
just as much as those other ones did.
Yeah. Because again, the companion is choosing it.
Yes.
I think probably is the crux of it. Yes, you're perfectly right to point all that out. I really think really good character arcs. Excuse me. So, and one of the strange things is Turlo, I think, is in the story more, and he's got more to do in the story. But
Yeah.
Tegan's character arc is better than his because
Oh,
he doesn't.
easily.
Yeah, he doesn't really have a character arc. He's just kind of like doing stuff. But Tegan has that really emotional ending that sort of ties it all together.
Well, I think it's
Um,
it's almost it's I think it's strangely deliberate to leave her out of like any big active roles in the story. Turlo's the
mm,
one who's doing stuff and is sort of like always like present and in the moment and okay, what do I do? But Tegan is allowed time to sort of take it all in.
yeah, that's true. And she's also because she develops the sort of the stronger friendship with I've forgotten her name, but the medic
Yes.
who's with her, um, and it makes her death that much more brutal.
Mm.
As I said, very very grim story. But yes, you're perfectly right to point out these really good character arcs. I really like the characterization of the Doctor in this story,
Yeah.
and there's a couple of things that I think should be unpacked here. So the first is this is in terms of just broad characterizations of the Doctor, this is kind of what Attack of the Cybermen was doing, but in this instance, Eric Sayward is actually succeeding. Um,
Yes, I agree.
because he came close, I think, in the story to really fucking up the Doctor's characterization and making him the ruthless, nasty little shit that he was in Attack of the Cybermen. He came close, but he didn't quite get there, and that's why I think that the core of this story, that's why I find it so compelling, because as you say, he's I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say like he's going down like he's taking a deliberately like fascist path, but he's
Oh no.
becoming more ruthless, and he's confronted with that when he's seeing Davros. And I actually got a bit nervous. I'm like, oh, but wait, doesn't like I definitely remember that he doesn't kill Davros, but does he decide to do that? Does he not? And if that choice gets taken out of his hands, are we looking at another Boomtown situation, or what's happening? But that's not what happens. In fact, I think it it again it kind of succeeds. It also succeeds where Boomtown failed in the sense that it sort of had its cake and it ate it too, in the sense that you had the Doctor where the choice seemed to be taken out of his hands because he, was distracted and the door was shut. But when he's banging on the door, you can clearly tell he's still going to do it. But he is still able to make the choice in the end, despite, despite the fact that all the enemies are killed, not by his hand, but they're still dead. He still makes the choice that that's a bad path to go down, and that's why Tegan's departure is so important. And I love that bit where he says, "Yeah, I left Gallifrey for similar reasons. I must change my ways." And again, I really admire and just enjoy how bold that was.
Well,
Um, and
I haven't seen Caves of Androzani yet, but
hmm,
considering how close this story is to Pete Davidson's departure, I wonder if that's something that's gonna factor into how that all played out. It's going to be interesting
yeah,
rewatching that episode and seeing if there are moments when the Doctor could have been maybe a bit
hmm,
more, uh, you know, aggressive or ruthless in order to solve a problem that he chooses not to.
hmm,
It's going to be interesting to see if they've, like, accidentally or otherwise created, I'm going to say, one of the first examples of a series wide arc leading into a Doctor's departure, because I don't know if that's happened in the past
hmm.
before.
I don't think it has. Not that much. Not to this extent. I don't think. So yeah, we'll be Yeah, we should take a look at it at some point. But yes, it'd be interesting to see how that sort of all fits together.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, just really a solid characterization. And there's something else that I actually only noticed this morning, or to the extent that I did, that I noticed this morning when I was watching it. Um, there are a lot of little small bits of characterization that also help with the bigger character arc that the Doctor has, because he is absolutely dedicated to fighting Daleks and catching Daleks in this story.
Yeah.
To a honestly to kind of a disturbing degree, not just with that big decision where he's like, yeah, no, I'm going to kill Davros. There are other little bits too. So, for example, when they're in the TARDIS and it's hurtling through the time corridor, I hope I'm not misinterpreting this, but there's one bit where, Turlo is flung against the wall. Um, Tegan goes over to him, and I think she says to him, "Are you okay?" And then the Doctor answers and says, "I can't free the TARDIS from the time corridor." So already, from the beginning, we're being shown that he's, you know, dedicated to, fighting the Daleks to almost to the exclusion of all else. He's
Well,
ruthlessly, um, trying to, to catch them.
at
This
that point,
gets
does he know that the Daleks are involved?
Yeah, I think he says, yeah, that it's called the Daleks' time corridor. By
Oh,
that point.
I might have missed that because I think when he like the first episode cliffhanger is him
Hmm.
seeing a Dalek and reacting to it. I think in shock, but maybe that's just because oh no, there's a Dalek here now. Run.
I'm pretty sure they establish it. I'll probably have to go back and take a look, but I'm pretty sure.
I might be wrong, but I just missed it
I'm
if I
pretty
did.
sure they do, and again, it would map onto it. But there's also another bit when they first meet Stein, and he's clearly, seriously distressed. And he's just saying, "Are you sure you haven't got anything to eat?" And the Doctor just keeps asking, "Oh yeah, what happened?" And then when he says, "Are you sure you got anything to eat?" He just stands up and says, "Relax, I'm going into the warehouse." Um, so again, I think these are small subtle bits that are showing that he's excluding, you know, other concerns for this concern for, just fighting Daleks.
Yeah.
Also later on, when Tegan gets hurt, there's a bit where, I mean, understandably, he goes and checks her out and say, "Are you all right?" And she says, "Yeah, I think so." Oh no, 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 the medic says, "Yeah, she should be okay." And then the Doctor just, um, gets up and leaves, and he just says, "Oh, I need help with the debris outside." That seems to be not like a majorly undoctory thing to do, but there's something unsettling about that. I think it's showing that he's losing a bit of his compassion, because he feels, a hatred for the Daleks, maybe even some conflicting emotions, given he didn't destroy them when he had the chance in Genesis. So I think these are small little things that are helping to really build this character arc, and I find it richer and more compelling for it. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how you feel about that, but Those are
Well,
my thoughts.
a lot of this stuff I didn't notice when I was watching it.
Mm.
But I wouldn't be surprised
Mm.
if they were deliberate. It could also be a case of, I mean, I'm not here to argue that
Mm.
what was deliberate and what wasn't, but it's
Mm.
very possible it was a case of maybe he was, in the initial draft, maybe he was a bit more compassionate in those moments and more attentive, but the script needed to
Mm.
be shortened down to 4 episodes. So, in interest of keeping the plot moving, those moments had to go.
Mm.
Um,
Oh,
Again, I
actually, that
wasn't in the
reminds me.
room. Yeah.
Sorry, you said 4 episodes. I was gonna actually ask. So there's basically two different versions of this story. There's no difference in terms of content, but one is split into 4 episodes, which is the version I have on DVD, and presumably the version you saw. But I
Yes.
think it's officially registered as two 45-minute episodes, which is interesting. Um,
Okay.
yeah, and
I
that's
think
why.
I
Sorry, you
think I
go.
read that that's how it was. Maybe it was initially aired as two back-to-back
Hmm.
episodes. Um,
Hmm.
like it was 4 episodes, but they just aired it as two. I might be wrong about that.
Hmm.
I'll give it a quick look up now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I had heard about that. That there
Yeah,
are
yeah.
sort of it was it sort of
Because I did check the TARDIS wiki and it says two 45-minute episodes, but then it has a note in the plot where it says this concludes episode one of the four-part version of the story. So again,
yeah.
I'm not
So I've got
sure.
it here.
Hmm.
It was written as and intended to be transmitted as 4 episodes, but there was
R-
a scheduling change
mm,
at the time, so it was transmitted as 2 episodes of 46 minutes each. Um,
right,
However, all reruns and the DVD release have it as 4 episodes.
right. That's interesting. Um, cool. But yeah. So yes, getting back to what I said, yeah, the characterization of the Doctor is quite good, and I think it's possible that some of them that not all of these decisions were super deliberate. Um,
I mean,
I think they
regardless of whether
might.
they were or not, they helped to serve his arc in
Yes,
this
that's
episode
that's
really
certainly
well.
true. Because again, there are moments, as I said, like Eric Saywood is taking a big risk here because and this is one of the things I didn't notice that much when I was a kid when I watched it. The Doctor doesn't like he's still the Doctor, but that lack of compassion is not unnoticeable. I think it's certainly present, and
Mm.
it's only really in the end after Tegan leaves where he realizes, yeah, wow, this is actually not a great not a great attitude to be taking. I
Well,
also love the fact. Sorry, go ahead.
I mentioned that it would be interesting to watch Caves of Androzani with that mindset, but it would
Mm,
also be interesting to rewatch some of the episodes that preceded this one, like Frontios and whatever some
mm,
of the like immediate precursors to this were,
mm,
to see if there is more of a darker undertone to the character coming out, because I think
mm,
that'll help us narrow down whether or not it was a deliberate like
mm,
series long arc that they were considering, or if it was just
mm.
something that happened in this episode because of Tegan's departure.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it will be quite interesting because you think a lot of people think when they think Peter Davison, they think, oh yeah, the gentle, cricket-loving gent. Um, he's the nice guy, but he's yeah, disturbingly ruthless in this story.
Mm-hmm.
Even maybe this is a very small thing, but when he takes the gun to kill the Dalek, that just seems like it makes sense because it's a Dalek, but like the Doctor firing a gun, I mean.
Yeah, it does
I
stand
don't
out.
know that. Yeah, there's something about that that's just uh, pretty full on. The only other example I can think of a doctor firing like a gun actually happens in the Visitation, and he only does it to help unlock a door because that's something else. Um, you may have noticed there's no sonic screwdriver here, and that is because
Yeah,
in the Visitation it gets destroyed.
right.
Um, which actually makes a lot of sense because you maybe I don't know if you were wondering this, but you may have thought, oh well, if that door was locked to the place where Davros is, why doesn't he just use the sonic screwdriver to unlock it?
It hadn't occurred to me, honestly.
Hmm.
I hadn't really thought of that. with the
Hmm.
classic era, the sonic screwdriver isn't something that's on my mind as much as it is in the revival era. I think maybe because
Mm-hmm.
like in revival, who there's a lot of attention put on the sonic screwdriver a lot more of the time. Like whenever
Yeah.
it gets a remodel, there's a lot of attention brought to it.
Yeah.
Whenever there's a new companion, he has to like reintroduce it. With the classics so far, it's just sort of been like, if he needs to use it, he'll use it, but it's not one of his like go to implements.
Yeah, and I think even I'm not sure. Like at the very least, I think the fact that it can open a door, it's at the very least downplayed in the um in the classic series as opposed to the um revival, whereas that's the main thing it does.
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes sense. Um, yeah.
Um,
Overall, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was about to move on, but do you want to wrap up this line of discussion first?
Um, yeah, I'll just say that this is a really grim story.
Yeah.
It's even again, it's like a good version of Attack of the Cybermen in terms of tone and theme because it's pushing the limits in terms of how bleak it is and how grim the Doctor's characterization is, but it's not crossing that line. It's not
Yeah.
crossing into nasty 80s cynicism that we saw with Attack of the Cybermen. It's doing a real good job there. And again, it's something that I notice more than that I'm an adult. There are so many, like I said, what did you say, 76 on-screen deaths?
Yes.
That is really astonishing when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
My God, there's, again, it opens with innocent people getting gunned down in the street by policemen. It's, man, Jesus Christ. And you got people dying and getting, replaced by clones, and you've got innocent dudes just with their metal detector getting shot. And you've got just, like, as, Tegan rightly said, a lot of good people have died today. And it just, I really, I do admire it. Like I don't know. Maybe it is appealing a bit too much to my like edgelord, but I do in Doctor Who at least. Again, this isn't true in all cases, and certainly Attack of the Cybermen is an example of it being a very bad case. But generally speaking, and I'm sure I've probably touched on this even before with my issues with Moffat. If I have the choice between an episode that's a bit too sentimental or an episode that's a bit too grim, I'll choose the grim.
Sure.
There's just for me, it's more of a personal thing, but there's just sort of a more emotional honesty to it, which is also why I like the Doctor's characterization in this story because it kind of goes back to what I said um, with Tooth and Claw, the idea of the Doctor being this very powerful being just traveling around space and then sometimes realizing, this is maybe not a very good lifestyle. I admire the fact when that happens, and I find it just viscerally quite compelling. So yeah, I just want to point that out because yeah, Jesus, this is real fucking grim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about Terry Malloy?
Yes, yes, sure.
Yeah, fantastic Davros.
Yeah, he's my favorite. I mean, I love Michael Wisher, and maybe I'm a bit biased because he has yeah, he's played Davros the most of any actor. Um, I'm sure of it. Um, and
At
he's
least
he's
on
good
screen, you mean? Like Big
on
Finish might have
screen.
something to say about that. Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, I'm not sure if Big Finish boosts those numbers in anyone's favor or not. Like,
Oh no, it does.
it does.
Davros is
Okay.
in like his Terry Malloy is in. I think, unless I'm mistaken, most of the Big Finish audio stories.
Oh,
The Davros.
it's Terry Malloy in Big Finish. It's not
Yep.
the guy they got for the revived era.
Nope. It's Terry Malloy.
Oh, okay.
The Davros collection I've got has got a whole disc of Davros stories, and they're all with Terry Malloy. Everything
Nice.
from the I Davros series, which incidentally, you were talk about grim. Holy fucking shit. I don't know if we'll ever do look at the Big Finish audio stories.
I'd like to
Maybe
at
I
some
Dav.
point.
Sorry.
I'd like to at some point, just for a bit
Yeah, it
of
might be
fun. Just
fun. But if we look at I Davros, man, brace yourself because it gets to I genuinely mean this. It gets to like basically death metal levels of fucked.
wow.
It's really full on. Like you can tell it's clearly like a side project in the same universe of Doctor Who, but not with the Doctor, because man, they wouldn't be pulling these stunts with a normal Doctor story. Yeah, there is significantly disturbing things that happen in that story. But even other great stories, there's a story just called Davros, and it's Terry Malloy playing Davros, but it's also got Colin Baker in it. That is a really good story, and also a good example of why Colin Baker really didn't get a fair shake until the Big Finish audio stories, because they do really good characterizations with him in it. Another one with called the Juggernauts, where Davros has infiltrated this. It's a planet, and he's implanted like small brain implants in people, so they hallucinate and think that he's a completely different person called Doctor Vaso. So that's and also the mechanoids are in it, so that's a thing.
Oh, okay.
And other things like Terra Firma, which is the Eighth Doctor story, which is quite a good one too. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of them that are quite compelling, and we should look at them at some point because they're quite good. Anyway, so point is, yeah, Terry Malloy's played the Davros the most, and you can see why, because he's really good. Very compelling here, I think.
Yeah, he's got the nice range of, he can be sort of smooth and a somewhat polite talker, and then he can go full, megalomaniacal screaming,
Yeah,
and he
that
does
was always
both really convincingly.
that was always the fun part for me as a kid. Just ooh, mad villain. I mean, you and I have been in plays together before.
Yeah,
I think you can see some influence there.
I genuinely can. Yeah,
Yeah. So it's all good fun. I think we've touched on this before, but the way Davros is written in this story as well is really great because, for example, early on when he keeps just insisting that he only wants to work on the space station, he's giving all these sort of rationalizations as to why it's like, I need to be close to my cryogenic chamber, and oh, what would happen if the virus escapes on board the Dalek ship? And then Lytton says every precaution has been taken, and he just really childishly just says, I work here. Or
yeah,
not at all. But here's the thing. Here's the reason why I love that. Yes, it's funny. Yes, it's wonderfully over the top. But this goes back to what I said before about Davros' duplicitousness. I'm convinced that it's almost like he's deliberately putting on a show. Like he knows that this is what he's got a reputation, this is what's expected of him, and the real reason why he's doing this is because he knows what the Daleks are up to. He
yeah,
knows that they're going to just make him basically like a pet or a servant to fix their problem. And he knows that once he fixes their problem, they're probably just going to kill him anyway. He doesn't
yep,
want to go anywhere near the Dalek ship. And so he sits in the space station, and he hatches schemes, and he uses his little mind control green laser thingy to exact his will, and that just adds to that layer of complexity, which is really really great. Yeah, I really kind of dig it. So yeah,
yeah. It's a really nice Davros follow up, as I mentioned before.
yeah,
Carrying on from Genesis, he now has that uh, sort of buried mistrust of his own creations.
yeah. Like he's learning his lessons.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. Yeah, and we're gonna see more of that in the future, I think.
yes, we certainly yes, I'd say we will. He There's one bit that I really love near the end. And again, I didn't notice this as a kid, especially given I hadn't seen Genesis at this point. Excuse me, but the bit where he dies because of the Magellan virus,
Yeah,
I'm convinced that's a bit of callback. It's his hypothetical virus. The tiniest pressure of my thumb, enough to break the glass, would end everything. Yes, I would do it. That for me,
yeah,
I'm I'm fairly convinced that's deliberate, and I love it because it's nice and subtle. It doesn't have to be overly explained. It's just a wonderful thing that ties Davros's character together again with theme. It's, as I said before, it's the sort of racism meets Theseus element. He's succumbing to his own fascist hubris. He thinks, oh yeah, I'm genetically superior. I'm different to the Daleks. I'm above them, but he can't even he doesn't even have the foresight, despite the fact that he's a brilliant scientist. He can't think that whatever the biological component that the virus attacks in the Daleks that he also has.
Yeah.
And his death, I'm using that with quotation marks because he obviously shows up again, but his death becomes all the more compelling for it. And that
Yeah.
line, which I've mentioned before, he says, I'm not a Dalek, I cannot die, I am Davros. It's just great.
Well, it's also especially it plays up his hubris when you consider that. Well, clearly the Mervellans developed it, and they know about Davros.
Yeah.
So clearly they would have designed it to take him out as well.
Mm.
It's definitely way more of a Khaled virus than it is a Dalek one. Uh,
Mm.
but he doesn't even consider that because he's like, I'm above the Daleks.
Mm.
I am the only one who can rule them, and therefore I must be around to see it through. There's no way I can die. I've got backups beyond backups. My life support system has 3 fail safes.
And yeah, here's the escape pod that I'm thinking about over there, and yeah, and also it's a wonderful, I think, sort of subversion, I guess, of Genesis, because in that story, Davros thinks his similarities to the Daleks are what's going to save him, but they don't, because the Daleks are arguably even more ruthlessly fascist than he
Yeah,
is in that instance. But here, it's his dissimilarity to the Daleks that he thinks is going to save him, but it's not.
yeah,
It's his genetic similarity to them, and there's just something so beautiful about that. And I love the fact that Eric Sayward has ended his character arc in the story that way. It's just really it's just fantastic stuff. So yeah, I think that's Stavros, which is really great.
Do you want to talk about some of the stuff you don't like as much about this story?
Yes. So again, they're mostly little things, but there are quite a few of them. Um, so I think the first thing to point out is even Eric Sayward himself has said there's a bit too much rushing around in this story. There are quite a
Yeah,
few, bit of loose ends that don't get tied up. Like Davros says, "Oh, I will then build a new race of Daleks, and they will be even more deadly." It's like, okay, I guess they're establishing something else here, but that doesn't really get tied up. It's not too bad because you could argue that's just part of his characterization from being like a ranter and having constant schemes and them just sort of failing. But
yeah,
again, it's a loose end that doesn't quite fit together. Um, when the Dalek says, "Oh, the collapse of Earth society will soon occur. I've got all these clones around the world," and then the Dalek ship just gets blown up. Again, I admire the grimness of it. I admire thematically how sort of downtrodden that is, but like, or downbeat, I think is more of the phrase. But it's a bit of a loose end. It's like, okay, this is there, but why? The whole weird subplot of your duplicates will return to Gallifrey to assassinate the High Council. That doesn't
yeah.
go
That was a
anywhere.
weird one. Had there been established by this point that the Daleks and the Time Lords were, or at the very least, the Daleks were eyeing off the Time Lords? Like, was there
Um,
anything like that established by this point, or is this more of like a, you know what, Doctor, you've been hassling us for a long time. We're gonna take your home now. Fuck you.
I think, well, yeah, there's no like direct indication of it because we've seen the two previous Dalek stories,
Yeah,
and there's no indication that they knew who the Time Lords were. So, but it's perhaps
well,
just assumed that they know in the intervening time, and because especially now they've got their hands on time travel, they
well,
know about the
and
Time
also
Lords.
there's also the fact that Davros sees the Doctor and doesn't go, "That's not the Doctor. The Doctor has big frizzy brown hair and a big scarf. Why does he
Mm,
look like that now?" I think
yeah,
it's pretty clear by this point they've at least
yeah,
worked out who Time Lords are and
yeah,
what the Doctor is.
yeah.
The thing about that exchange that confused me more was
Mm,
like the Doctor's big reaction to the
mm.
High Council being destroyed,
Huh.
because it's a smaller. It's not to the extent of why would they lie that Jodie Whittaker gets to throw out,
Yeah.
but there is kind of that element of, well, he obviously wouldn't be wishing for the death of the High Council, but he
Mm,
knows that they're as duplicitous as Daleks, if not more.
yeah.
So his reaction shouldn't be, "Oh no, don't, please, oh my god,
Mm,
oh the High Council,
mm.
no."
I had wondered about that. I maybe it's because he's sort of understands more the implications of it. So,
Sure,
like,
yeah.
he knows if the leadership of the Time Lords dies, that could just plunge the whole universe into chaos because
Yeah.
of how powerful they are and how much they can control time. So that's why what I assumed was happening there. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's a fair point. Um, yes, there's that. There are a couple of things, and I did write some of this stuff down because I just wanted to
Cool.
keep abreast of it. But so okay, the first thing, and it's I want to say it's only a small thing, but I have a feeling it might be a bit bigger than I'm even willing to admit. So when the Dalek ship is attacking the space station, it's established that half the crew are dead.
Mm-hmm.
How exactly has that happened? Because the only attack that we've seen is the external one from the Daleks, ray guns or whatever it is. And they literally say like Styles, the other Doctor character in this story, when she says dead along with half the crew, and then I'm pretty sure literally after that Osborne says battle crews are preparing to dock. So the Daleks obviously aren't on the ship at that point. So how did they kill half the crew? The only way that could be explained is if they broke open the space station and half the crew just got destroyed that way. But if that's the case, then how come the whole ship wasn't just taken
Well,
out?
isn't it
If
implied that they sent a squad out to well, they sent a scouting party out first to see what was going on, and then when they discovered it was an attack, it was like, okay, send out the fighters. Like, wasn't that and I interpreted that to mean like in the same way you would send out like fighter jets in the Air Force. Like, you send out, like in A New Hope, like Red
yeah,
3
yeah, yeah,
checking in, Red 2 checking in. I assume that's what that was.
maybe.
I don't know if that accounts for half the crew. I don't know.
But yeah,
Well, it could also be a case of like during the attack, certain parts of the ship were sort of knocked out, or knocked offline, and like maybe there were explosions cascading through the prison as a result. It requires a bit of legwork to get to the point where you can square it. So I do
yeah,
agree that it's kind of an issue.
yeah,
But I think there are ways you could interpret it where it does all
sure,
make sense. But
sure.
the episode shouldn't have to make you do that legwork
Yeah,
for it.
there are a lot of little bits I think in the story where again they're not like massive plot holes, and we think yeah this is obviously terrible, but
Yeah.
there's just a lack of clarity. And again, I think it even goes back to what Eric Saywood says. There is really a lot happening in this story, and he's just not quite focusing on enough on some of the details that are super important. So that's one thing. The second thing, what have I got here? Okay, this is again another small issue, but I'll bring it up anyway. You know how in the Dalek ship, I mean, yeah, I assume it's the Dalek ship. I think it's got to be when they're where the Supreme Dalek is basically,
Oh
because
yeah.
the Supreme Dalek doesn't leave. How are they able to see inside the prison space station if they're in the Dalek ship? Like,
I
there's one
assume.
scene where it's implied that they hacked the security cameras. It's when Styles said, "Oh, we'll just do it on a small frequency. The Daleks can't, operate them all or something like that."
They
In
can't be
fact, have I?
monitoring everything.
Yeah. I've got the quote here. Try the high frequency range. The Daleks can't monitor them all.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
assume
implied.
they must have found a way to tap into their feed through sci-fi technology. I mean,
Dalek tech.
we've seen a time TV well before this point.
Yeah.
It's not unreasonable that the
Yeah.
Daleks will be able to remotely tap into video feeds. I mean, we can do that
I mean,
now
they
with our technology.
they remotely
So.
communicated with the TARDIS in the end.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
yeah. But again, this is just another one of these issues where it's it just is not excuse me. It's just not as clear as it should be. There's a small elements where it needs to be defined a bit more. So that's another issue. This is a tiny little issue, and maybe I'm misinterpreting it. But then there's a bit where the Doctor says to the Daleks, "But Stein was more effective, a living, thinking being, not some tin pot machine." I don't know if he's implying the Daleks are robots, as we have said before with Destiny. They're not robots. They've got things in them. We know that. That was the whole point of the last
Yeah,
thing.
I
That
think
was a little.
in this context it's not as bad.
Oh yeah, no, no,
Yeah,
no, no.
he's clearly referring to the act of like free will and
Yeah, yeah, and the fact that the Daleks are ruthless, totally ruthless, as Davros
yeah,
says, that
yeah.
they try to act like machines even if they're not.
Hmm.
Yeah. Again, it's just a small thing. It's not massive, but
Yeah,
yeah,
on the heels of Destiny, it was kind of like, oh, be
yeah.
careful.
It's just yeah. I had a fucking flashback. Um, it was a bit traumatic. So there's that. The other thing, this is I think a more of a bigger thing, and it was something which I didn't think it had an answer until I watched it like a second time. Um, so why the warehouse? Why are the Daleks focusing on that? Why Earth and why the warehouse specifically? Um, I'll read this bit out in full just to explain it. So this is what I've written.
Yeah.
Why did the Daleks focus on the warehouse as opposed to anywhere else? Is there an unaddressed scientific reason? This seems like something a Revival Who episode would deal with. And then I wrote that Stein actually does address it, but this is what he says. He says it was safer there, and it acted as a law. With the bomb disposal squad duplicated, they had someone to guard the warehouse. But that doesn't seem to be a particularly good justification, because it's like, or at the very least, again, he's not being very clear. Like, what does he mean by lure? Does he mean to lure the bomb disposal squad there to make clones of them? But if that's the
Yes.
point, then if why do that? Like, if you're only getting a duplicate of a bomb disposal squad to defend the warehouse, then why put it in the warehouse? If that makes sense.
Well,
If you're only
because
luring guards to guard the thing that you want to lure them with, then yeah, what's the point?
I think it was it was handy. I think because if there was a bomb threat in a more populated area, there would be
Mm.
evacuations. It would be more of
Mm.
a public thing. Whereas if it's an
Mm-hmm.
abandoned warehouse, you can comfortably send in a bomb squad on the down low
Mm.
without getting any higher government figures
Mm.
in involved.
Mm.
Um, yeah, like I think also the bomb squad is like a means to an end, where it's like you get the bomb squad in first, and then when the military realizes this is taking too long, we're going in, and then you get the army. So
Mm.
I think it is more of like a like the bomb squad can guard the thing, and then you also have bomb squad people as duplicates who, and assuming you get all their memories and skills as well, which it seems like you do,
Mm.
uh, you get people who are skilled at maybe not, if not at like combat, then certainly at like holding their own in these kinds of situations.
Mm. Mm.
And then, as like I said, you eventually get to the army and people who are trained in military combat who can more readily defend what you need them to defend.
Yeah. Um, but it kind of, as you said about the other point, I feel like there are just a couple of leaps that you have to sort of take to get there, and I feel like
Um,
I don't
Look,
know, it
I
just,
think
yeah.
for me, most of this was pretty evident on my watch. I think the only question that you raised, which doesn't have a clear enough answer, is why Earth specifically.
Mm.
And I think for me, that's again, I think that, I mean, this one is more of a leap, but
Yeah.
I think that's a subconscious thing that the Daleks are doing, where it's like, well, the Doctor likes Earth, let's go fuck them up again.
Well, that's the interesting thing, right? Because, well, a couple of things. One, the reason why I point this out is because it all just seems to me to be a bit of, like BBC budgeting. It's like, oh, we've got this
Yeah,
warehouse that we can film in. Okay, we're going to set most of the action in the warehouse, so that's just what we're going to do. So it feels like they're working the plot around that, and I
they
don't
are to
mind it
some
when Doctor
extent.
Who.
Yeah,
I don't mind it when Doctor Who does that, but it's done it before and done it better. Um,
sure.
or when I mean before, stuff that we've seen already.
Yeah,
So, that's I think that's the one of the main bits of frustration. But also, in terms of like the Daleks having that subconscious understanding of Earth and even the Doctor's relationship to it, when Stein says it acted as a law, what you could have done is they could have used it as a law for the Doctor to get him, onto the Dalek spaceship because they know, oh, we're the Daleks, he hates us, in Earth he loves it, so he's obviously going to want to, check it out. And then get him there to make duplicates of him and his companions to go off to Gallifrey to enact this
Well,
assassination
yes.
plan.
Well, yeah, but that's not their plan. Remember, because they're still
Yeah, yeah,
their first plan is to deal with the virus. That's what they
yeah,
need
yeah,
Davros
yeah, yeah.
for. Drawing a doctor in is more of a side thing.
Mm.
That because like it the whole Gallifrey thing is only mentioned by that one Dalek.
Yeah,
That's clearly like a side hustle they've got going
yeah,
on, where it's like, well, now that we've
yeah,
got you here, Doctor, here's what we've been planning for you. We've been developing this
yeah.
duplication technology. We've tested it out on a heap of humans. We know it works.
Mm.
We don't know that it doesn't quite work, but
Mm-hmm.
shush, don't
Mm-hmm.
tell anyone.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to now use it to send you and your associates back to Gallifrey, overthrow the council as just a bit of a laugh. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
I don't think the like for my money, it would have taken them some time to get their duplication technology to the point where they were comfortable doing it on the Doctor,
mm-hmm.
and that's when they have the time cone or whatever it was called, uh,
Mm.
pulling like find the TARDIS
Mm.
and draw him in that way.
Mm-hmm.
When they're talking about allure, I assume they were referring to, again, people that they can duplicate that are
Oh yeah,
useful
yeah,
to
no, no,
them.
definitely.
Yeah, because you know what, the Daleks wouldn't want to duplicate anyone that have no use duplicating.
Yeah, sure.
There's no point to them doing that.
Mm.
So I think putting out a bomb threat in a warehouse is, I mean, I think it's a really effective way of doing it. I can't work out a better system other than a
Mm.
full scale invasion, but that's what they don't want because they're trying to lay low at the moment.
Mm.
So I think
Mm.
I think it all works fine, but I can see why you're kind of not quite making that leap.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah, and again, like, well, as you say, the whole, you know, Gallifrey assassination side quest, it is that. It's definitely a side quest, and I
Yeah.
think, um, like I said, it would have been nice if they used that maybe to tie it all together and make the lore also a lure for the Doctor, but again, because there are so many ideas in this story, that's like a whole other, story in and of itself. It's obviously not the main point. Um, the Daleks are obviously on a mission here.
Yes.
It does actually speak in a way to what I said before, the duplicitousness of Davros, but also the Daleks.
Yeah.
They have a lot more nuance here. You can hopefully now you can see why I hated the characterization of the Daleks in Destiny so much,
Oh yeah, I
because they're
can.
just
I.
so one-dimensional.
Oh no, yeah, I got that. Like from the conversation that we had, and even from watching the episode,
Yeah, yeah,
it's pretty evident. And here they're really great.
yeah, because they're really the duplicity is really great. Like one Dalek says it was but one trap, and I'm like, yeah, great. They've got all these, plans within plans, layers on layers, and we've got the Supreme Dalek almost playing mind games with Davros and the Doctor, and it's just really really great stuff. Um,
But
yeah,
just back to your earlier point about the
mhm,
duplicates placed all around the Earth.
yeah,
It does seem like a pretty unnecessary thing to do. Again, because like overthrowing the Earth government isn't one of their plans. It's just something that's thrown in at the last minute,
yeah,
and it's something that the Doctor is able to easily fix by going, "You idiot! You didn't work out the technology right. Your duplicates aren't perfect. They will
yeah,
eventually snap back to themselves."
hmm
So at that point, there's no real need to bring it up in the first place.
hmm
So that was a bit distracting.
mm,
So yeah, I agree with you about that one.
yeah. Um, yeah, I think that's it for the flaws.
Okay.
Yes, perhaps. Again, I don't know whether I was being too harsh on myself, but perhaps this story is a bit better than I have given it credit for.
Well, I mean, I'll say this: like, whether or not I can explain these things away,
Mm,
a lot of them are pretty rushed. There is a lot
mm.
going on in this story. There are like heaps of that it switches focus a lot in terms
It does.
even just in terms of what its a plot is supposed to be.
Yeah, it's.
To the point where in
Mm.
like episode 4 or something, I was like, oh yeah, the virus. That was the catalyst. I
it
forgot about that.
and it does switch back and forth a lot. Like you'll notice, like I think I've said before, Doctor Who sometimes can be a little bit stagey, but
Mm.
here, for instance, it's jumping between plot points really quickly.
Yeah.
Um, I think in particular the bit where the doctor's getting strapped into the brain drain thing, like it cuts between that to the warehouse to the prison ship. I think even back to the Dalek ship and even the time corridor. It keeps doing this in a really short space of time, which for classic Doctor Who, it surprised me a little bit.
Mm.
Which is quite interesting. That being said, and this is true of the whole story, really, but the fact that all these narrative threads are able to be strung together as well as they are,
Oh yeah.
even if it's not perfect, I think is quite admirable.
Yeah, and I think that overall it's largely saved by how well the themes play into it.
Yes, I'd
Especially
agree.
like that last episode really does a great job tying
Mm,
everything together with
yeah, it does.
the Doctor and Davros
Yeah,
especially. I think that's where the episode or the story rather really shines when it gets to
yeah,
that final 25 minutes and you
yeah.
see what they were building towards and you see even where they're building to in the future because I think we are going to get in the future if memory serves some Dalek on Dalek civil war stuff coming up. And I
Yes, we will.
wonder I don't really remember Revelation or Remembrance all that well. I can't quite remember if that Civil War is about Davros versus like another Dalek higher up or not. Um,
It is in Remembrance, not so much in Revelation,
okay, well
from
we'll get to
what I
them.
remember. Yeah.
Um, but like I think that yeah, largely a lot of this episode is saved by how well integrated the characterization is with the
Hmm.
themes of the story. It does
Yeah.
it's one of those episodes that does a really good job blending all three elements of narrative storytelling in such a way that you're sort of happy to overlook a lot of its flaws
Hmm.
because it is just like yeah it's just really solid. I think
Hmm.
this is one of those rare instances where in talking about it my opinion of it has actually gone up.
Hmm.
I can't speak for you certainly. I'm ready to score it. Are you?
There's one more tiny thing I will mention, which I
Go for it.
found very interesting about it.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't a criticism; it's just an observation.
Yeah.
With, I really find the design of the space station interesting.
Mm-hmm.
In context of sci-fi generally, because you can clearly tell. I think this is a story that's taking place in a post-Alien world, as in the movie Alien,
Yeah.
because I once heard, God, I can't remember who said it, whether it was a film historian or a actor or something. Somebody somewhere said that if you compare the design of the spaceship in Alien to the design of the spaceships in, for example, 2001: A Space Odyssey, it's like a difference between white collar spaceships in 2001 and blue collar spaceships in Alien. Now that's putting it a bit bluntly, but you know what I mean. Like the
Yeah. Yeah.
the spaceship in like you can make assumptions about the sort of money that's funding these ships by looking at them. The spaceship in 2001 is very clean. It's very it looks like really high tech. Everything's working perfectly. The
Yeah.
spaceships in Alien look really run down. They've got a very sort of grimy sort of cyberpunk aesthetic going on, and the I think even the some of the technology isn't working as well as it should be. And that holds true in Doctor Who too. If you compare this spaceship to, for instance, the spaceship in the Ark in Space, there's a definite parallel. The Ark in Space is a 2001 spaceship. This space station is an alien type spaceship
Oh
because
yeah.
they
Definitely.
they say how terrible the technology is, and there's also wonderful little bits where we're shown how bad the technology is, like when they're having to kick doors open and pull the shield down by hand.
And the kill
It's
switch of Davros isn't
Yeah,
working.
that doesn't work, which is great. So yeah, that's just an interesting observation, and I love the fact that I don't know, like I like finding little connections there, but the fact that they've integrated it into the story, um, is also quite good.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
score this episode at an 8 out of 10. I think this is a really great story. I will look forward to rewatching this and picking up on more stuff that I missed on my
Hmm.
first watch through, especially with the ending in mind. Like I knew that
Hmm.
Tegan left already. I'd seen this one before,
Yeah.
but I forgot like some of the circumstances surrounding like
Hmm.
sort of the tipping point, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I mean, I think also on the heels of Destiny and
Mm-hmm.
how much that episode dropped the ball. The fact that this one is
Oh
juggling
yeah.
so much and is able to, for the most part, keep it all pretty well balanced
Mm.
is sort of a minor miracle, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'm gonna land on an 8. Where are you sitting?
Um. Look, as I said, like watching this story a couple of times in the last, week and a half has been an interesting process because on the first time I watched it in preparation for the podcast, I would have said 8, but then every time I watched it after that, it sort of kept dropping down. Now part of that is because again, I want to make sure I'm not strapping my nostalgia goggles on too tight. I know I've been very conscious about that throughout this podcast, but it's still something I'm conscious about.
Yeah.
Also, I didn't want my horrible experience with Destiny to cloud my judgment here because, as I said, it really was um, like recovering from some sort of minor trauma. It's like I even said to you before when we were doing Destiny, I saw a clip from this story. Just as it happens, like the day we recorded, and like, oh my god, this is what good writing looks like. Finally, yay, So I didn't want that clouding my judgment too much either. I didn't want to think, oh, just because it's clearing all these, I wouldn't say basic bars, but because it's not making all the terrible mistakes that Destiny was, I didn't want that to be influencing too much how I
Sure.
viewed it. So look, I'm, I apologize for a bit for the delay, but I'm really torn
Hmm.
because the first time I watched it for the preparation of this podcast, I thought, wow, this is fucking great. This is way better than what I remember it being as a kid because I'm able to recognize all these, especially the thematic complexities. So I would have said an 8 then, but again, it's just kind of dropped a little bit after watching it a couple more times with some of the flaws I mentioned. And I know you're right to point out that the flaws I mentioned are probably a bit more minor than I'm thinking of them, but they're still kind of there. So, um, I'm okay. I'm going to say a 7 with the small caveat that the good bits are really, really good.
Sure.
And I'm
Yeah.
glad we had this discussion because you've reminded me that those bits, the good bits, are basically just as good as I thought they were when I watched them for the first time in preparation for this podcast.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
yeah, so I'm gonna sort of meet in the middle ground and say yeah, I'm gonna say a 7.
Cool. Well, we only have 2 more episodes left of this Davros retrospective that we're going on.
Hmm.
Uh, it's gonna be. We've also got our second Sixth Doctor story coming up, which
Hmm.
is I hope going to be a nice palate cleanser after
I
Attack of the Cybermen.
from what
By all accounts, Revelation is good.
yeah, I've
It
heard
has a
it's meant to
good
be pretty
timescale
good.
score.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
I've heard it's one of Baker's Colin Baker's better performances and
yeah,
better written stories.
um,
So
yeah. But next time, we have an integration of Classic Who and Revival Who, because we're going to be looking
hmm,
at School Reunion.
yay.
Until then, I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and this is your weekly reminder that fascism is bad.